Hi pals, it's me Artie, then in pronouns only, and my video this week is talking about a new disabled drama on the scene. It's also a cop drama, again. Anyway, so there's a new cop show for the disabled on the telly. Code of Silence stars a deaf actress in the role of a deaf main character. Her character is initially struggling to make ends meet by having two full-time jobs, one of which is working in some fancy schmancy cafe where she basically gets fired for being disabled. Been there, bitch. High five. Because even though she is deaf, her boss doesn't give a fuck. And he thinks she's being rude when he's just literally talking to her back, talking to her side, or when she doesn't hear a customer or gets a customer's order wrong. So, anyway, she's fired very early in the season from this job. Her other job is working in the canteen of a police station, where she does say at one point that they barely even make minimum wage down there, and that the police station should sort their shit out. Honestly, I love Rose in this show. I love Rose in general for like a lot of the things that she does and says publicly. So I'm pro Rose. Loved her in Strictly Come Dancing, you know. Due to this job, they have a community database kind of thing that you can opt into and fill in any skill sets, etc., that you may have and that may be useful to the police. So our main character's skill is lip reading. She has no formal training, so they wouldn't usually use somebody with lived experience of lip reading. Like, I personally don't think I would be very good at lip reading myself if I had no sound, but that's because I heavily use lip reading to supplement and aid my auditory processing disorder. I'm not deaf. They're very different things, but there are a lot of similarities slash familiarities in this show to my own experience of having an auditory processing disorder. But I heavily use lip reading as an aid for my auditory processing issues. So the words I do hear are often context for the lip reading I have to do. So I'm not deaf, but seeing mouth shapes can help me with context to identify what some of the words a person might have said to me are. It is also very different of an experience being deaf and lip reading, which is why I believe she is obviously plenty qualified for this particular role, whereas I would not be. The thing is, she loses that other job. She's only being paid at this canteen job and here and there for the lip reading work. She's now pretty desperate for more money, like regularly, though her mum does say that she's going to go out and look for a job. Her mum is also deaf. It doesn't seem like her mum lip reads as much as she does, which honestly, I don't think you should have to. Slay. All the ways of communicating, lip reading sounds really exhausting, which I'm pretty sure is actually something another deaf person on Strictly said. What was her name? Tasha? I think she says similar things, that doing a lot of heavy work of lip reading people made her so exhausted on the show that she often took afternoon naps. So for me, it's exhausting. And I don't even do it in the full way the deaf people do. There are a couple of examples in the show as well where the mum uses other modes of communication with non-deaf people, such as writing, just writing notes down on a piece of paper, passing them back and forth. I think, I can't remember, someone on the show might have used texting as well, but I can't remember. So her mum's trying to get a job. She does eventually get one, or she gets an offer for one. However, this is like one of the good parts of this show where they heavily critique access to work, which I don't even have, by the way. Like, it sounds like a horrible process, and they have like a lower minimum amount before they'll help or support freelance. Like, you need to earn a certain amount of money before they will support you, and it's like, I don't think I meet that criteria. Actually, maybe I do this year because of my research work. Maybe I do this year. I need to look into that. Support worker, help. That was a tangent. Anyway, they are criticizing access to work. I think it's really funny because access to work has already been appalling generally for a long time, but also the current government have been trying to and are planning to limit or lessen or remove, defund the funding for access to work, so disabled people can have support accessing either employment or their own self-employment. And they've been doing that whilst at the same time planning to remove, lessen / make harder to access benefits in the UK for disabled people, low income people, and saying that's to get us into work. How does that doesn't make any sense. Anyway, look at this other video I made where I'm talking about how fucked up all this bullshit is with our government and assisted dying and cutting our benefits. If you want to be miserable for like a half hour. So I love a little jab at access to work. I think they deserve it, bitch. So yeah, she has been offered a job, but she needs access to work before she can even start training, because they just simply do not have the capacity or ability to train a deaf woman, even though it is literally for a text-based helpline service. You know, like one of the few jobs where you're like, yeah, that's a great service for deaf people to work on. No, they have no way of training deaf people. That makes no sense. So for there really to be absolutely no other way of training this woman for this job role seems like a pile of bullshit, for one, obviously. But apparently access to work won't be like with her, supporting her, responding to her for the first time. I can't remember exactly when they said, but I mean, from what real people are throwing around, it's somewhere between like usually 7 and 18 weeks, if not more. I think it's usually around the 18-week mark. So she does eventually almost lose the job because of this. I think because they can't hire her without access to work, basically. But I think there was a possibility of her getting the job back later on. But it's not part of the main plot, so I don't really remember if that was resolved. I think it was. But I just wanted to mention this plot as well because I did really appreciate what it included, and I really enjoyed the jab at access to work. But also, yeah, critiquing the jobs for not being able to accommodate disabled employees, even when that one to me makes literally no sense. I don't know how you can't just train. I don't know, man. So anyway, as I was saying, the main character is now kind of desperate for money because initially the mum didn't have a job. She now does, or she gets one eventually, blah. She lost a job that she was never going to start, then might have / get it back. But again, it's all this waiting around. In the meantime, they have bills to fucking pay. They might be about to be evicted as well, but in the meantime, their bills have also gone up several £100s a month. So she wants to get more work with the police. However, she seems also to be a little bit too invested in the case itself. It turns out she has been laughing with her colleagues when she was in the canteen about a couple of police officers who were always there talking and whispering with each other because the main character would be lip reading them and telling her colleague what they were talking about. And it turns out they were both having an affair. One of which is a police officer on this team that she is lip reading for. And he's an asshole to her. Like the whole time, he's a huge asshole. He really doesn't need to be such a dick about it when he doesn't actually technically know if she knows anything or not, but also it is exposed later on that literally everybody in the team already knew anyway. So yeah, nice one, mate. Just like aggressing a disabled person who did nothing wrong. And she didn't even tell anybody. At no point in this show, besides the colleague she was working with in the canteen, she doesn't talk about this to anybody else. So it is just a bit like, I don't, you know, what is it? More flies with sugar, with honey than whatever the fuck. Like, why are you such an asshole trying to keep her quiet? Just like, I don't know, have a little chat and be like, hey, I'm gonna assume you lip read all my conversations with that lady. You did? Oh, great. Anyway, obviously you know what's going on. We're having an affair. and I'd really appreciate it if you just kept that to yourself. Is that all right? Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. Goodbye. And it just didn't need to be a weird thing. It didn't need to be so weird because he was like really aggressive. Not helping the ableist police allegations here, really. The main character then also works out where this criminal has been sort of put to stay for this job, Liam. So she ends up getting herself a second job in a pub, or in the pub that he's staying above, which ends up also being owned by one of the other criminals that they have been watching. She also makes contact with some of them whilst they're in there, mainly Liam because he lives above the pub and he's there more often than anybody else, but she does also see the man who owns the pub, somebody else who brought guns, and some woman who's part of this thing, and her ugly mate who's selling the housing estate that she lives in with her mum, and that's why the bills have gone up and they're being evicted. Anyway, she also then keeps being told off repeatedly leading up to this point and after this point by, I don't know, one of those police officers, because she's doing a lot of things she's not really supposed to be doing, things that are risking her own safety, and also the safety of others, and the I can't think what the word is. There's like a word, not dignity. How much the, like, whether the case will even be able to be taken to court. She keeps putting herself in harm's way. And then also, like I said, getting too invested in Liam as a criminal, even though she's bringing them results and bringing them intel that they need to be able to actually do anything for this case. Like, yeah, I get it, but also I don't really care that much about the crime. I sort of do, but like not that much. I was more so watching this because I just wanted to see what they were going to do with deaf representation. But like, yeah, I do understand it's dangerous, like girly, chill, like come on. And then she ends up basically kind of dating Liam, and does actually end up liking him. Whoops. So she, yeah, like I said, manages to wager a deal with the police where she is now an informant rather than just a lip reading consultant. I don't believe she goes back in for any more lip reading because now that she is involved with them, they don't want her to be seen back at the station. That also means she's been fired from the canteen job as well because of what she did getting the job at the pub, but also because of that like safety concern that if she was seen to be at the police station, it would probably be assumed she would be an informant anyway, rather than just a civvy member of staff. So yeah, that's the only job she has now again, and she won't be paid as an informant until the end of the investigation. So basically, like I said, I don't really care about the crime. I don't really care about that plot. I'm not here for that. I'm here for the disability. I'm here for the deaf people in this show. Thank you. I do really like the way that they involved deafness in the show and how they involved disability in the character. There are some really interesting elements that I have mentioned, I think, in some other videos for other reasons that link to my auditory processing disorder. Code of Silence, it is a show about a deaf girl, so it's not the same, but there is an element in the storytelling that felt very familiar to me and my auditory processing issues, because she's basically being used as a lip reader for the police. And what they do on the TV is they sort of show blurred words where it's not quite sure what the word is, or it will have like parts of words, or like maybe the odd word that she's caught easily and clearly, and then it slowly kind of translates
the parts of words, blurred words, and like the few words that she did catch into a sentence. And she explains in the show as well, a lot of lip reading is also about context and body language. So, using that as basically an example or as like a metaphor, I guess. Is that a metaphor? I don't know. But basically, this is how I feel when I'm trying to understand what people are saying when I am not able to actually process what they've said necessarily.
You can kind of see on the screen the words that she's trying to lip read and how she can identify certain words very easily. The other words are blurred or only parts of them are clear, and you sort of see the process of the decoding of the words, and that's something that feels very familiar for me. But I really enjoyed that aspect visually because obviously, I mean, for one, there's probably going to be a larger deaf audience for this show. Seeing a deaf actor playing a deaf character, I mean, I watched this because of that. And I'm not even deaf, but I am disabled. Like, I feel like a lot of disabled people will watch shows with their disability involved out of curiosity, a lot of the times morbid curiosity, but also when you know that there is a disabled actor in a disabled role, you know that it is more likely the show, the plot, the representation will be better than what you are normally seeing in most mainstream television. So you're more likely to go and watch one of these shows because you know that the performance comes from lived experience. So, yeah, obviously, because they will have a larger deaf audience, I think it's really clever and appropriate how they used on screen indicators of like showing that process, but also it lets non-deaf people in on like maybe what that process is like for deaf people every day, and like, hey, isn't this kind of exhausting? Actually, maybe learn some BSL. There are some really great moments in particular earlier on with lip reading, but they do pop up throughout the show as well, where Rose's character explains that it isn't quite that simple to just lip read. There are other elements to it because you do need context, and context includes things like body language, facial expressions, and it also includes things like accents and like the situation generally going on. One of the criminals, Liam, actually has a Manchester accent, which she says she personally struggles to decipher. And like I said, as well as the context of who these people are, what they are doing, what it is they're meeting for, that sort of thing, it's easier for her to understand what might be being said while she lip reads if she understands a little bit more about the context of the situation and why they're all meeting. She also explains things like there are lots of words that are harder to decipher because of certain letters. There are certain letters that look like other letters or don't really look like you're making a sound to a deaf person. For example, saying car, you don't necessarily see the person saying the C. Is that the way we're around? I don't know. Is that C? You won't necessarily see the person saying the C sound, but you will see the R. I just appreciated going into depth with these things because, like, I think it's educational and helpful in general for people to understand those things about being deaf, but also the way it's done was very clever. Like I said, it's not surprising at all that a bunch of coppers are ignorant about lip reading, deafness, and disability, you know. So, like, whilst most of the characters have good intentions, a lot of the times they're not very good at, for one, like, facing Rose's character when talking, so she can't always, she loses words and she's like, no, you need to, like, speak facing me. Or, like, some of my own experiences is that I mumble a lot. Thanks, mum. I blame her for mumbling all the time when I can't understand or hear her with my auditory processing issues, but it turns out I also mumble and deaf people can't hear me.
Hello, it's me. I realized there was a really big plot point that I didn't even mention in this video when I first filmed it. So I really wanted to at least briefly acknowledge and discuss that because it's I think it's a really important point. So basically, the gist is there's a point where Liam bugs Alison, the main character's hearing aids. And I just want to at least put out there and acknowledge how much of a violation that is to do to somebody. I do think it kind of got played off in the show. She seems to forgive him, but yeah, he managed to link her hearing aids to some kind of like recording device so that he could literally listen in on her conversations through her ears. And he does that because he thinks she's a snitch, which she is, and he literally hears her talking to the police. So like I understand why he did that, but yeah, I don't think I like it is addressed later on when she realizes that that's what he did, but like I don't think it was really addressed like too seriously about how much of a violation doing something like that is to somebody. Yeah, you know, like that's an invasion of her body, and another way, I guess, as well, that you could be more vulnerable as a disabled slash deaf person, particularly as like a lot of people who use hearing aids. I don't know how to phrase this, sorry, like, you know, people who have hearing loss or have been born deaf. Many people who use hearing aids can connect their hearing aids to their phones so they can hear things better than trying to hold the phone up to their ear for like phone calls or watching videos and things like that on your phone. But yeah, like how these like disability aids and conveniences as well can actually also open you up to more risks and more issues generally. And like obviously for most people anyway, they can just bug your phone, my guy. They can just listen to what your phone can hear. But there's like something different about it being hearing aids, particularly because that is basically part of them. But yeah, like I just did not write that in my script for some reason. But that was a really big plot point that I was kind of like, damn, that's fucked. And my other point as well, which I didn't know until after writing my script and seeing some videos on I don't know, Facebook, I think, randomly. But Rose actually was involved in the production of this show before the script was even written. So like she had quite a big hand in creating the show and creating the deaf characters, and had a lot of say in what ended up in the script, which I think really shows in the show. And again, is another similarity with Astrid Murder in Paris, where the French show consulted a lot of autistic people with the scripts, but then did not hire any autistic people. So at least again, this show did better than other shows often do. But I felt like both of those points were like really important to the show, and I wanted to include that.
It is also nice to see the difference in what life is like for deaf people versus hearing people in the show. So the main character is deaf but lip reads a lot more than her mum does. She also speaks more like vocally than her mother does. Her mum can speak vocally but mostly doesn't. And before the show started, Rose's character was in a relationship but had recently broken up with a guy who is also deaf, and he works with slash in the council. He also doesn't speak vocally really at all, and has an interpreter to speak vocally for him in meetings as he signs in BSL. I also think it was really nice to see the normalization of all the deaf people in the show being able to speak BSL, because I think it's something very contentious with a lot of non-deaf parents, where non-deaf family members of deaf children or deaf people, the idea of learning BSL, learning a whole language for one member of your family, doesn't seem worth it to many people. but many deaf people have talked about how access to their language, BSL in Britain anyway, everywhere else, whatever sign language is called elsewhere, it's important for their sense of self, a sense of identity, reclaiming or feeling confident in their disability and in their life, and also connecting with the rest of their community. I do believe all of the characters wore hearing aids. And there's also a little bit about relationships that follows the main character through the show that I quite liked. One of those is obviously that her ex-boyfriend, who is also deaf, her mum is very much invested in them getting back together because she had a previous relationship with a non-deaf man, who is Rose's character's father, and it didn't end very well. However, throughout the show, we see that the main character is interested in Liam, one of the criminals, especially after she ends up becoming an informant and she actually gets to know him a little bit better. Towards the very end of the show is when we actually see a little bit more about Liam, but a little bit more about the main character's father as well. It turns out her father is also a criminal. I don't know if that was just kind of like weird writing or that's something that's maybe going to be sewed into if they make another season. But it was just a little bit weirdly convenient that her deaf mother had a child and like a serious romantic relationship with a non-deaf man who ended up being a criminal, for the main character to then also be a deaf woman who has a relationship with a non-deaf man who ends up being a criminal. I don't know. Why are they both criminals? It does seem like there's a possibility for the show to come back for a season two, maybe further seasons, in a similar way to Astrid Murder in Paris was sort of set up. In Code of Silence, the father is also played by the comedian John Bishop. Why the like? What does this guy do in his spare time to just kind of be in some random TV shows? He was in one episode for this show. It's just a very bizarre thing slash setup. But anyway, his character does speak fluent sign language, or at least it seems so. I might be misremembering that. Maybe he uses a mixture of sign language and hoping she'll lip read him. I think it's more that I think I misremembered when I was writing my script. But he does speak sign language. It seems like there is a possible implication of history repeating itself within his family. Liam, who is about to be an official criminal, who begins to learn sign language for the main character. So yeah, I don't know if that's something that might be continuing if they do a next season, that maybe that's what it'll be centering around. Apparently I've hit my step goal for the hour, and that is just because I've been shaking my arms whilst I talk. Like, the show could very easily just be wrapped up where it is and leaving it sort of like vaguely open-ended, where it's like, well, obviously there's not an end to the show necessarily. We know that she's probably planning on going on to do his course, as I'll talk about in a second. But, you know, giving everybody a happily ever after, but also an open-ended sort of like pleasant looking future. I do think there is a possible likelihood of a second season because some of those things that they didn't necessarily fully wrap up or fully they didn't really give like an official vibe to it. I think a lot of shows do this where their first season they do leave it like a little bit open. Like, I think, they probably learned from other shows like Chaos where they've left it too open ended, being like, there's going to be a season two, bitch, to get all your answers, and then they get fucking cancelled. So I think a lot of shows are now being like, oh, limited series, bitch. Oh, it's a one off, girl. Hell yeah. And then it's like, well, we were kidding. You guys liked it so much. We're making a second season. Like Adolescence, which did not need another season at all. That one made no sense. Or Malpractice, which did make some sense, where it's just going to be different stories, but still following the same people investigating them. I think there's a high possibility of them possibly having another season, because at the very end of the final episode is when one of the police officers she's been working with offered her this leaflet with an official lip reading course to take after she also, like, she's just been given a check for like 100 grand for working as an informant, so she's got a spare 4 grand there probably, because earlier in the season she did look it up herself and was like, wow, I don't have the fucking money for this shit. I think that was also for like a smaller short course rather than the official course. So that was only, I think it was only like a couple of hundred, whereas this one was like 4 grand. But he was like, I think you would be really good at this, so go and get the official documentation and whatever, and then we can work with you more legitimately and safely. So yeah, it seems kind of similar to Astrid Murder in Paris in that way, that she might actually go and get a specific qualification to legally allow her to continue being a police lip reader, because it does come up numerous times, like I said, through the show, that she couldn't be a witness in the court because without this qualification and because she's disabled, the jury are unlikely to even care or believe what her statement even was, which is fucked, but like, glad they addressed it. That's another thing they did address. This show has a lot of small moments of like addressing ableism and injustice in the justice system and the police system and law system and whatever in general. So like, that's why I like this season and why I wouldn't mind it carrying on, because I do like those like moments of being like, yeah, that's fucked. Anyway, we've got criminals to catch. I'm here like, well, I kind of like the criminal, and I think they should just like, well, not all the criminals for this show. I liked Liam anyway. He was a vigilante. That's why I liked him. He wasn't like a real criminal. He was like, nah, I'm gonna do this because this guy killed my dad. Well, my foster dad. Fuck everybody. Anyway, I've got lost. Yeah, so like, if she gets a qualification, she would be seen as more legit, both to use in general, but also to be witnesses in any trials necessary, if she continued doing the work. So there's definitely like a lot of interesting possible plot lines that I think they could be exploring if they did more seasons. But like I said, I also think the show would just be fine if it ended where it has ended. I think it has a good rounded storyline, and I think it really went into depth on things, both general disability wise, but also specifically deafness, being part of the deaf community, being a deaf person. I do just mostly wish that it wasn't a crime drama. And I wish it was just like, I don't know, maybe just like a general drama. Like, yeah, I just hate that everything is always attached to the police and propaganda all the time. But like, yeah, I guess that's the world that we're living in these days. Everything is police. Everything is police. Anyway, so that's just my video for the day. Like, I didn't really analyze much. I just wanted to talk about this new show that's come out. I do think people should go and watch it. What was it available on? I can't remember. These ones are usually Channel 4 ITVX. So British people can go and stream them quite easily for free. But I always get them confused and always forget. So yeah, this is maybe a bit more of a review and discussion of the disability representation. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think. And I mean, the most connected video to this one is obviously the one about my little review about Patience, which is the UK version of Astrid Murder in Paris I mentioned a few times in this video. I basically talk about both of those shows, the differences between the two, the good and bad things about both of them, and just generally my thoughts. That is about an autistic woman working in criminal records who ends up helping police solve crimes because she has autistic brain. Like, this is maybe the one thing I think is kind of like fun about these shows, is that when it does center a disabled person, it's very much like, hey, look, their disability is actually beneficial, and not in like a superhero way. It's just like, hey, look, these people have better skills than us in these particular areas. We should maybe just listen to them. Maybe we should. Wow, I know, what a concept. Listening to disabled people. Please, please, please. Anyway, yeah, go watch that video. If I can work out where it was streamed, I'll try and link that down below as well, so you can easily access the show. If I forget, tell me, because sometimes I forget. I'll have to go and do it later because somebody's reminded me. So yes, that's my video for this week. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, watch other videos as well to support the channel, and I will see you next week. Bye.